I am pregnant, she said. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Malik didn't say anything, and Tope could almost hear the gears turning in his mind as he processed the bombshell she had just dropped. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Malik spoke. It can't be mine, he said, his voice low and tense. You are married, Tope. This cannot be my child. It is yours, Tope insisted, her voice shaking. Bola and Tope were inseparable friends throughout their university years. They had met at a party during their first year, quickly bonding over their shared love for books, movies, and a common desire to make the most of their university experience. While their friendship seemed effortless, their personalities couldn't have been more different. Bola was the quiet, thoughtful one, always careful with her decisions, while Tope was the bold, adventurous type who never hesitated to jump into new experiences. Despite their differences, they complemented each other in a way that made their friendship strong. And by the time they had reached their third year, their bond had deepened. They supported each other through the stress of exams, late night study sessions, and personal challenges. Tope was the one who encouraged Bola to step out of her comfort zone, and Bola often provided the calm and perspective that Tope often lacked. They balanced each other perfectly, and their friendship felt unshakable. One evening, during the middle of the semester, Tope approached Bola with excitement in her voice. Bola, there is a party this Friday, and you are coming with me. Don't say no, she said, flashing a mischievous grin. Bola, the ever cautious one, hesitated. I don't know, Tope, you know I'm not really into the whole party scene. Tope waved off her concerns. Come on, Bola, you need a break. And besides, the crowd is fun. You will love it, trust me. Bola trusted Tope's judgment. After all, Tope had a way of making everything more enjoyable, and Bola had to admit she hadn't done anything fun in a while. Reluctantly, she agreed. Alright, fine, but you owe me, Bola said with a playful smirk. Friday night arrived, and as promised, Tope dragged Bola to the party. The atmosphere was lively, filled with music, laughter, and the people mingling everywhere. Bola felt a bit out of place at first, but Tope stayed by her side, introducing her to various people. At one point during the evening, Tope introduced Bola to Malik. Bola, this is my friend Malik, she said casually. Malik was tall, with an easy smile and an air of quiet confidence that immediately caught Bola's attention. He wasn't loud or flashy like some of the other guys at the party. Instead, there was something intriguing about the way he carried himself, as if he didn't need to impress anyone. Bola smiled politely, shaking his hands. Nice to meet you, Malik, she said, feeling an unexpected warmth in his presence. As the night progressed, Bola found herself talking to Malik more and more. They clicked almost instantly, sharing stories about their university experiences, their plans for the future, and even laughing about the awkward moments they had encountered along the way. Time seemed to fly, and before Bola knew it, the party was winding down. Can I get your number? Malik asked, flashing that charming smile. Bola hesitated for a brief second, glancing at Tope, who was busy chatting with another friend across the room. She couldn't shake the feeling that there was something in the way Tope had introduced Malik earlier, but she brushed it aside and handed him her phone. Sure, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. Here you go. Unknown to Bola, Malik and Tope had once dated long before university life. It had been a short-lived relationship, ending quietly without much drama, but Tope had never fully gotten over him. While she had moved on to other relationships and adventures, Malik had remained a soft spot in her heart, a reminder of what could have been. But Tope had never mentioned this to Bola. To her, it was something buried in the past, and there was no need to stir up old memories. At least that's what she convinced herself. As Malik and Bola's connection grew over the following weeks, Tope watched from the sidelines. At first, she was supportive, laughing with Bola as she shared stories about her new romance. But underneath the surface, a quiet jealousy began to take roots. Seeing Malik, the guy who had once been hers, now so easily interested in someone else, especially her best friend, gnawed at her. She had expected him to be over her by now, but every time she saw Malik with Bola, the old feelings bubbled up inside her, no matter how much she tried to ignore them. Still, Tope hid her feelings well. She smiled and laughed with Bola, pretending to be happy for her friend, even as her heart ached. Malik, on the other hand, seemed to have moved on completely, treating Tope as nothing more than an old friend. The realization stung, and Tope began to wonder if she had ever meant as much to him as he had to her. But she kept it all to herself, silently wrestling with the emotions while watching Bola's relationship with Malik blossom. A year after graduation from the university, Malik and Bola's relationship had grown even stronger. They had weathered the challenges of transitioning from student life to real world, and their bond had deepened with each passing day. Bola was thriving in her career, and Malik had found success in his work as well. Everything seemed to be falling into place for them, but Malik had one more step to take, a step that would change both of their lives forever. One warm evening, Malik surprised Bola with a dinner outside an upscale restaurant that sat high above the city, offering a breathtaking views of the skyline. The lights twinkled below as they dined, and the atmosphere was filled with soft hum of conversations and the clinking of glasses. Malik was unusually quiet throughout the meal, and Bola couldn't help but notice his nervous energy. But she brushed it off, assuming he was just distracted by work. As Desert arrived, Malik suddenly stood up, his heart pounding in his chest. With a deep breath, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Time seemed to stand still as he got down on one knee, his eyes filled with love and sincerity. Bola, he began, his voice steady but filled with emotions. From the moment I met you, I knew there was something special about you. You've made my life better in ways I can't even describe, and I can't imagine spending the rest of my life without you by my side. Please marry me. Bola's hand flew to her mouth, her heart racing as she stared at the man she loved. Tears welled up in her eyes, and she nodded enthusiastically before finally managing to speak. Yes, yes, of course, I'll marry you, she exclaimed, her voice trembling with joy. Malik slipped the ring onto her finger, and the entire restaurant erupted into applause. Bola was beaming, her eyes shining with happiness as she hugged Malik tightly. It was the perfect proposal, more than she could have ever dreamt of, and she couldn't wait to start this chapter of her lives with Malik. Of course, Tope was one of the first people Bola called to share the exciting news with. She was thrilled for her best friend, or at least that's what she told herself. As she listened to Bola gush about the proposal and the plans for the wedding, Tope couldn't help but feel a pang of jealousy deep in her heart. Malik had been hers once, even if only for a brief time. She had imagined the future with him once, but now that future belonged to her best friend Bola. Still, Tope pushed those feelings aside. She loved Bola like a sister, and she wasn't about to let old emotions ruin their friendship. Instead, she threw herself into helping Bola plan the wedding. She was there for every dress fitting, every cake tasting, and every tiny detail that needed to be decided. Tope smiled, laughed, and celebrated alongside Bola, pretending that everything was fine. But there were moments, quiet, fleeting moments, when Tope's facade cracked. When she looked at Malik and Bola together, so in love and so perfectly matched, she couldn't help but wonder what her life would have been like if things had turned out differently. Those thoughts gnawed at her, but she buried them, refusing to let them take over her. The wedding day arrived, and it was nothing short of magical. The venue was a stunning garden draped in fairy lights, with flowers blooming in every corner. Friends and family gathered to celebrate the couple's love, and the air was filled with laughter and joy. Bola looked radiant in her white gown, and her smile never leaving her face as she walked down the aisle towards Malik, who was waiting for her with tears in his eyes. Tope stood by Bola's side as her maid of honor, holding the bouquet and trying to keep her emotions in check. She had practiced her speech 100 times, making sure that every word conveyed the happiness she felt for her friend. But as she watched Malik and Bola exchange vows, she felt a bittersweet ache in her heart. It should have been her, a voice whispered in her mind, but she quickly pushed it away. At the reception, the celebration continued in full swing. There was dancing, speeches, and plenty of champagne. It was during this lively reception that Tope was introduced to David, one of Malik's closest friends. David was everything Tope hadn't realized she had been looking for. He was charming, successful, and incredibly attentive. His easygoing nature and quick wit immediately put her at ease. As they danced together under the stars, Tucker felt a connection that she hadn't expected. David was a businessman, confident and ambitious, with a sharp sense of humor that had Tucker laughing throughout the night. There was something about him that felt familiar yet exciting, and by the end of the evening, they had exchanged numbers. Don't let this be the last time we'll see each other, David said with a grin as they said their goodbyes. Tucker smiled, her heart fluttering with the possibilities of something new. Not long after the wedding, Tope and David began dating. It was a whirlwind of romance, full of excitement and passion. David was everything she had wanted in a partner, and he treated her like a queen. For the first time in a long while, Tope felt happy, truly happy. A year after Malik and Bola's wedding, Tope and David got married in a small but elegant ceremony. It was a day filled with love, and Tope felt like she had finally found her place. Standing next to David, she realized that life had taken her down a different path than she had expected. It was a path that had led her to happiness. Her marriage to David had started on a high note, full of excitement and promises. Their wedding had been beautiful, and the early moments of their marriage felt like a dream. They traveled, laughed, and enjoyed each other's company. Tope felt like she had finally found happiness that she deserved, especially after seeing Malik and Bola's marriage flourish. But it wasn't long before reality started to creep in. As the honeymoon phase ended, so did David's constant attention. He had always been dedicated to his career, and now that their lives were settling into a routine, his work seemed to take priority over everything else. He was always on business trips, leaving Tope alone for days or even weeks at a time. At first, Tope tried to be understanding. She told herself that David was working extra hard to provide for their future, and she knew how much this career meant to him. But as the days stretched into weeks and weeks into months, the loneliness began to weigh on her. She missed the intimacy they had once shared, the late night talks, the spontaneous dates, and the feeling of being his priority. David, however, seemed oblivious to Tope's growing unhappiness. He believed that by working hard and providing for her financially, he was fulfilling his role as a good husband. He didn't realize that what Tope truly craved was not the material comfort he provided, but his time, his affection, and his undivided attention. Tope found herself comparing her marriage to Bola's more and more often. Whenever they met up for lunch or to catch up, Bola would gush about Malik, how he surprised her with a romantic gesture, or how they spent weekends together, how attentive he was. Bola's face would light up as she talked about her loving husband, and each time it felt like a dagger in Tope's heart. She had thought marrying David would bring her the same kind of happiness that Bola had with Malik, but instead, it felt like something was missing. The envy she had buried for so long began to resurface, stronger than ever. Each time Bola talked about her perfect marriage, it stung Tope more deeply. She couldn't help but wonder if things would have been different if she had been the one with Malik. The more Tope dwelled on her dissatisfaction, the more distant she became from David. She tried to talk to him about how she felt, but her attempts were met with little success. David was always rushing off to meetings, conferences, and business dinners. When he was home, he was glued to his laptop or phone, preparing for the next big deal or contract. David, can we talk? Tope asked one evening after he had returned from yet another trip. She had been waiting for him all day, hoping they could spend some time together. But as soon as he walked through the door, he started checking his emails. David responded, absent-mindedly, his eyes glued to his phone. I mean, really talk, Tope pressed, her frustration building. You are always too busy with work, and we barely spend any time together anymore. I feel like we are drifting apart. David finally looked up, his brow furrowed in confusion. Tope, I'm working so hard for us. I thought you understood that. I'm doing this for our future kids. Tope sighed, trying to keep her emotions in check. I know you're working hard, but that's not the point. I don't need you to just provide for me financially. I need your time, your attention. I miss how things used to be. David seemed taken aback by her words, as if he hadn't realized just how much she had been feeling neglected. I'm sorry, Tope, he said after a moment. I didn't know you felt this way, but you know how demanding my job is. I'm trying to make sure we have everything we need." Tope nodded, but the sadness in her eyes remained. "I appreciate everything you're doing, but what I need more than anything right now is you. I don't want us to drift so apart that we can't find our way back." David sighed, rubbing his temples. "I'll try to do better, Tope, I promise." But even after that conversation, nothing really changed. David was still consumed by his work, and while he occasionally made efforts to spend time with Tope, they felt half-hearted, as if he were just going through the emotions. Tope tried to be patient, but her loneliness only deepened. The more time she spent alone, the more she found herself thinking about Malik. She couldn't stop comparing him to David. How Malik seemed to always be there for Bola, how he put her first, how their love seemed so effortless. It wasn't that Tope didn't care for David. She did, but the more she thought about what she was missing, the more she questioned whether she had made the right choice at all. Bola, on the other hand, continued to live in marital bliss. She and Malik seemed happier than ever, and Bola frequently invited Tope over for dinner or weekend hangouts, eager to share her happiness. Tope attended, putting on a brave face and pretending everything was fine, but inside, the envy gnawed at her. It wasn't long before Tope began to withdraw from her friendship with Bola. The constant reminders of Malik's attentiveness and their perfect marriage became too much to bear. She found herself making excuses for not being able to meet up, telling Bola she was busy or not feeling well. Bola noticed the change in Tope, but whenever she asked if something was wrong, Tope brushed it off, insisting that everything was just fine. But everything was far from fine. Tope's marriage was unraveling, and the envy that had been shimmering under the surface for years was now boiling over. She couldn't shake the feeling that she had missed out on something, that if things had been different, she might have been the one with the perfect husband and the perfect life. David remained focused on his career, oblivious to the fact that his wife was slipping away from him, emotionally if not physically. And as Tope's resentment grew, she found herself questioning more and more whether she had made the right choices and whether she could continue living with the consequences. The turning point came at a mutual friend's birthday party. It was an elegant evening, with music playing softly in the background and guests mingling under the dim lights of the venue. Tope hadn't planned on attending, but at the last minute, she decided to go, hoping it would be a welcome distraction from her strained marriage. David, unsurprisingly, was away on yet another business trip, leaving Tope to attend alone. As the night wore on, Tope found herself in a quiet corner of the party, nursing a drink and feeling out of place. That was when Malik approached her, his familiar smile instantly putting her at ease. They hadn't had a real conversation in months, mostly exchanging pleasantries whenever their paths crossed. But tonight felt different. The energy between them shifted as they began to talk, reminiscing about old times. "Remember that night back in the university when Titi convinced you to sneak into the lecture late and the professor caught you both?" Malik chuckled, his eyes lighting up with the memory. Tope laughed, shaking her head. "How could I forget that? I thought we were both going to get kicked out of that class for that stunt." The conversation flowed easily between them, the comfort of their shared history filling the gaps that had grown over time. As they continued talking, Malik opened up about the pressures of his job, his responsibilities as a husband, and how he sometimes felt overwhelmed by it all. Tope listened, offering her own experiences, and soon they were talking about their lives in ways they hadn't in years. Even as the evening wore on and more guests left the party, Tope and Malik found themselves alone in the terrace. The cold night air brushed against their skin, and the quiet created an unexpected intimacy. For a moment, there was a silence between them, not awkward, but filled with something unspoken. "Tope, I've missed talking to you like this," Malik said softly, his eyes meeting hers. Tope felt her heart skip a beat. She knew this was a dangerous territory, but the warmth of Malik's gaze, the familiarity of his presence, made her feel something she hadn't felt in a long time. "I've missed it too," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. The air between them felt charged, and before Malik could fully process what was happening, Malik leaned in and kissed her. They pulled away breathless, staring at each other in shock at what had just happened. "We shouldn't have done that," Malik said, his voice shaky with guilt, but even as he said it, neither of them moved. "I know," Tope whispered, her mind racing. She knew it was wrong. She knew Malik was married to her best friend, but the thrill of the moment, the feeling of being wanted again after so long, was too intoxicating to resist. Before long, what had started with a gentle kiss turned into a full-blown affair. It began with secret meetings in the early mornings or late at night under the pretense of Malik's work or Tope's errands. They found ways to slip away from their lives, meeting in discreet hotels or out-of-the-way spots where no one could recognize them. The excitement of sneaking around fueled their passion, making every stolen moment feel electrifying. For Tope, the air filled a void that had been growing inside of her for months and years even. With David constantly away, she had felt neglected, unloved and unwanted. But with Malik, she felt alive again. He made her feel seen, cherished and desired. It was in ways David never had. For Malik, the affair was more complicated. He loved Bola, he knew that. She had been nothing but supportive and a loving wife to him. But there was something about Tope that he couldn't just resist. Maybe it was the history they shared, or the fact that she had once been his, but whatever it was, it drew him like a magnet. Bola meanwhile had no reason to suspect anything was amiss. Malik had always been dedicated to his work, and she knew his job could sometimes be demanding. She trusted him completely and had no reason to doubt his explanations when he told her he was working late or had to travel out of town. In her mind, their marriage was solid, built on love and trust. Tope, for her past, tried to compartmentalize her feelings of guilt. She justified the affair to herself by focusing on the emptiness in her own marriage. David was never around, always chasing his next business deal, while Malik gave her the attention and affection that she craved. She knew it was wrong, but the temptation was too strong to resist. A few months into the affair, Tope began to feel the weight of her actions pressing down on her in ways she hadn't anticipated. At first, she thought it was just stress, the stress of sneaking around, of living a double life. But soon her body started sending signals that she couldn't ignore. She was nauseous every morning, and her energy levels had plummeted. It wasn't long before Tope realized the truth. She was indeed pregnant. The moment she saw the two pink lines on the test, panic gripped her like never before. Her mind raced through the implication. This wasn't David's baby. She hadn't been intimate with her husband in weeks or even months, but there was no question about it. The baby belonged to Malik. Heart pounding, Tope sat on the edge of her bed, the pregnancy test still clutched in her hand. She knew she had to tell Malik, but the thought of it terrified her. How would he react? Would he be angry, or would he leave her? Or worse, would he cut out of her life completely? Her hands shook as she picked up the phone, dialing Malik's number. When Malik answered, his usual calm voice on the other end of the line, Tope felt her throat tighten. "I need to talk to you," she said, her voice trembling. "Is everything okay?" Malik asked, concern creeping into his tone. Tope swallowed hard, trying to steady herself. "I am pregnant," she said. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Malik didn't say anything, and Tope could almost hear the gears turning in his mind as he processed the bombshell she had just dropped. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Malik spoke. "It can't be mine," he said, his voice low and tense. "You are married, Tope. This cannot be my child." "It is yours," Tope insisted, her voice shaking. "David and I haven't. We haven't been together in weeks. There is no way this baby is his. It is yours, Malik, and I'm sure of it." Malik was silent again, but this time, Tope could hear his breathing quickening. He was trying to hold it together, but she knew he was just as panicked as she was. The gravity of the situation was sinking in for both of them. This wasn't just a fling anymore. This was real, and the consequences were enormous. "Tope," Malik finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Tope, this will ruin everything. Bola, David, you and I, they'll find out." "I know," Tope said, her voice breaking. "I don't know what to do." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence between them filled the weight of their shared fear. Then Malik spoke again, more determined this time. "We need a plan. You have to convince David that this baby is his." Tope's heart sank. She had already considered this, but it felt impossible. David was barely at home, always busy with work. They hadn't been intimate in what felt like forever. How was she supposed to convince him the baby was his when he hadn't been together in weeks? I've thought about that, Tope said quietly. But David is never around. He's always too tired when he comes home. I've tried, but he barely even looks at me anymore. Malik cursed under his breath. The situation was spiraling out of control, faster than either of them had expected. He had never imagined things would go this far. It had started as a distraction, a way to escape the pressure of his marriage, but now he was deeper than he could ever imagined. Tope, we need to make it work, he said. Tope nodded, even though Malik couldn't see her. She knew he was right, but the thought of seducing David felt impossible. Every time he came home, he was exhausted, barely acknowledging her before collapsing onto the bed. That night, when David finally came home from one of his business trips, Tope made another attempt. She wore the dress he had once told her he loved, prepared his favorite dinner, and waited for him with a nervous smile. But when David walked through the door, his face was drawn and tired, his eyes barely focusing on her as he mumbled a greeting. Hey, Tope said softly, trying to keep her voice upbeat. I made your favorite tonight. I thought we could spend some time together. David glanced at her, his brow furrowed as if he were trying to remember who she was. Sorry, babe, he muttered, rubbing his temples. I've had a very long day. I just need to relax. Tope's heart sank. She had forced herself to keep going. Maybe after dinner we can. But Tope, not tonight, David interrupted, his voice sharp with exhaustion. I'm really not in the mood. Can we just talk tomorrow? He said. Tope bit her lip, fighting back the tears. Sure, she whispered, stepping aside as David brushed past her, heading straight for the bed. As she stood there in the empty dining room, the table set for a romantic evening that would never happen, Tope felt a wave of hopelessness wash over her. Their plan wasn't working. No matter how hard she tried, David was slipping further and further away from her, and there was no way to make him believe that the baby was his if they never spent any time together. She sat down at the table, staring at her untouched food in front of her, and buried her face in her hands. How had everything gotten so out of control? What had started as an affair to fill the void in her marriage had turned into a nightmare she now couldn't escape. As the weeks dragged on, Tope's desperation grew. The weight of her secret was becoming unbearable, and with each passing day, she felt more trapped. Her attempt to seduce David had failed miserably, and the window of time to make the pregnancy look believable as his was rapidly closing. The fear of being exposed gnawed at her constantly, leaving her anxious and frustrated. One afternoon, Tope arranged to meet Malik in a quiet restaurant, far away from the prying eyes of anyone who might recognize them. She sat across from him, her hands trembling as she picked at her fingernails. I can't do this anymore, Tope blurted out to him, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and anger. I can't have this baby if you're not going to be there for me. Malik, who had been struggling with his own guilt, looked at her, his expression torn. He knew they were both in too deep, but the thought of abandoning Tope now felt impossible. Tope, what are you saying? He asked, trying to remain calm. I'm saying that I would get rid of this child, Tope said, her voice trembling. I can't go through this alone, Malik. If you're not going to step up, then there is no point in keeping the baby. Malik's heart sank at her words. As much as the situation terrified him, the idea of Tope terminating the pregnancy left him feeling unsettled. He didn't know how to handle this. He was in way over his head, his mind raced as he searched for a solution, any way to make this nightmare disappear. Don't do that, Tope, Malik said, leaning forward. Please don't. Tope looked at him, her frustration building. Then what do you expect me to do, Malik? I am pregnant with your child. I just can't pretend this isn't happening. Malik was silent for a moment, unsure of how to respond. He had always been good at finding ways out of decisions, but this was so different. There was no easy fix here, no way to undo what had already been done. What do you want me to do, Tope? He finally said, his voice strained. I want you to marry me, Tope said, her eyes looking onto his. Divorce Bola and be with me. I will leave David and we can raise the baby together. Malik felt like the ground had just been pulled out from under him. Divorce Bola, the woman he had loved for years, the woman who had stood by him through everything. The thought of leaving her terrified him. Despite everything, despite his affair with Tope, he still loved Bola deeply. The idea of shattering her world, of destroying their marriage, filled him with dread. Tope, I can't leave Bola. Malik stammered, his mind racing. We've been married for years now. I made vows to her. This affair, it was never supposed to go this far. It was a mistake. Tope's face hardened. She had been prepared for Malik's hesitation, but she wasn't about to let him back out now. You think I wanted this either? She shot back, her voice rising. But here we are, Malik. I am pregnant with your child, and I am not going to raise this baby on my own. You have to make a choice, me or Bola. Malik's chest tightened as the weight of her words sank in. He knew she was right. They couldn't keep going like this. But the idea of divorcing Bola, of tearing apart the life they had built together, was more than he could bear. Malik was silent. His mind was now a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. He loved Bola, but his affair with Tope had brought him to this breaking point. He swallowed hard, the gravity of his situation pressing down on him like a weight he couldn't lift. He looked at Tope, then down at the table. His thoughts a chaotic mess. He was trapped, and no matter what he did next, someone was going to get hurt. Malik found himself trapped in the unbearable limbo. He couldn't bring himself to leave Bola, the woman who had built a life with him. But he also couldn't face the reality of Tope's pregnancy and the consequences of his actions. Every time Tope pressed him for a decision, he stalled, telling her that he needed more time to think, that he wasn't ready to make such a drastic move. In truth, Malik was terrified. Terrified of the fallout, terrified of breaking Bola's heart, and terrified of what his life would look like if everything come crashing down. Meanwhile, Bola was blissfully unaware of the chaos unfolding behind her back. She remained the devoted, loving wife she had always been, trusting Malik completely. Her days were filled with work, social events, and the occasional lunch with Tope, where she would happily gush about how wonderful Malik was. You are so lucky to have a husband like Malik, Bola would say with a smile, completely unaware of the tension that simmered beneath the surface. Tope, who had once been able to mask her emotions, found it harder and harder to hide the bitterness. She would nod along to Bola's praise, forcing a smile, but inside, her resentment was growing. Every time Bola sang Malik's praises, it felt like a slap in the face. Malik had promised her the world, yet here she was, carrying his child, while he continued to act as if nothing had changed. Tope felt used, discarded and abandoned. She had sacrificed so much for Malik, only to watch him waffle and delay, unwilling to make a choice. Later on, Tope confronted Malik once again, this time more forcefully than ever before. She couldn't take the waiting, the uncertainty. She needed answers, and needed them now. We can't keep doing this, Malik, Tope said, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and desperation. I am pregnant, and you're still pretending that nothing is happening. I need you to make a choice, me or Bola. Malik ran his hand through his hair, pacing back and forth. Tope, this is not that simple, he said, his voice strained. I need more time to figure this out. Time? Tope scoffed, her frustration boiling over. How much time do you think we have? I can't hide this pregnancy forever. It is only a matter of time before it starts to show. You need to decide, and you need to decide fast. But despite her ultimatum, Malik still hesitated. Every time he tried to picture his life without Bola, the woman who had been by his side for so long, he couldn't bring himself to do it. He loved her, even if that love had become complicated. So Malik continued to stall, telling Tope that he needed more time, that he wasn't ready to make such a life-altering decision, and with each passing day, Tope's anger and resentment only grew stronger. One day, Bola got a call from an unexpected friend. She was in a meeting with a close friend named Titi for lunch. They were chatting casually when Titi's expression shifted, her eyes filled with concern. Bola, Titi began hesitantly, her voice low. There is something I need to show you. It's about Malik. Bola frowned, confusion clouding her features. Malik, what's going on? She asked, feeling a sudden knot from her stomach. Titi didn't respond immediately. Instead, she unlocked her phone, her fingers shaking slightly as she scrolled through her messages. She found what she was looking for and handed the phone to Bola without saying a word. Bola took the phone cautiously, her heart beginning to race. On the screen was a video sent to Titi by a mutual friend. The video was shaky, clearly taken from a distance, but there was no mistaking what she was saying. Malik, her husband, was standing outside a restaurant with someone she immediately recognized, Tope, her best friend. Bola's breath caught in her throat as she watched Malik lean in and kiss Tope. It wasn't a friendly gesture, it was intimate, familiar, the kind of kiss that betrayed the years of trust Bola had placed in both of them. She felt her heart shatter as the video played, her worst fears unfolding right before her very own eyes. When the video ended, Bola sat there in stunned silence, her hands trembling as she handed the phone back to Titi. For a moment she couldn't speak, she couldn't think. All she could do was replay the scene in her mind, over and over, the betrayal cutting deeper with each passing second. Bola, Titi said softly, reaching out to take her hand. I am so sorry. I didn't want to believe it when I first heard the rumors. But when I saw this, I knew you just had to see it for yourself. You're my friend and I couldn't keep you in the dark. Bola finally found her voice, though it was barely more than a whisper. How long has this been going on? She asked, her eyes still fixed on the table, unable to meet Titi's gaze. Titi hesitated before answering. I don't know exactly, she said, but from what I've heard, it's been a couple of months now. Months? The word echoes in Bola's mind, each repetition driving the knife of betrayal deeper into her heart. Malik and Tope had been carrying on behind her back for months, all while pretending that everything was normal. All the while she had trusted them, never for once questioning their loyalty or intention. But now that she knew the truth, Bola realized that confronting Malik in a moment of rage wasn't the answer. She had always prided herself on her strength and composure, and she wasn't about to let this betrayal break her. She needed time to think, to process, and to plan her next move. As she sat down there, her heart pounding, Bola made a decision. She wouldn't confront Malik, not yet. She wouldn't let them see her broken, devastated by his actions. Instead, she would play along, act as if nothing had changed. She needed time to figure out what to do, how to handle this without losing herself in the process. She turned to Titi. Thank you for showing me, she said quietly, her voice steady. But I need time. I need to think about what I'm going to do. Titi squeezed her hand gently. My sis, take all the time you need. I am here for you, whatever you decide. Bola nodded, her mind already working. She knew she couldn't keep the secret forever, but she also knew that rushing into a confrontation would only lead to more pain. She needed to be smart, to think things through before she made any decision. For the next few days, Bola kept the knowledge of the affair to herself, pretending that everything was fine. She went about her daily routines, cooking dinner, chatting with Malik, and acting as if her world hadn't just been shattered. It was exhausting, but she needed time. The time to plan her next step, time to figure out how to handle the betrayal without falling apart. Malik, oblivious to the fact that his secret was out, continued with his usual routine. He came home late, offered vague excuses about work, and kissed her goodnight as if nothing had changed. Tope too remained unaware that Bola knew the truth. She continued to send casual messages, asking how things were going and suggesting they meet up for lunch. Bola ignored most of her texts, unable to stomach the thought of seeing her face to face, but she knew she couldn't avoid Tope forever. The betrayal hurt more than Bola could put into words. These were the two people she had trusted the most in the world, the two people she had confided in, relied on, and loved. She had spent days preparing for this moment. The idea of inviting Tope and David over for dinner, knowing the secret she was about to unveil, filled her with both dread and anticipation. She had to handle this carefully, without losing her composure. Malik was still blissfully unaware of what was coming, and Tope likely had no idea that her betrayal was about to be exposed. On the evening of the dinner, Bola set the table meticulously, making sure everything looked perfect. The food was cooked to perfection, the fine wine glasses sparkling under the soft light of the dining room. It was the kind of dinner they had all shared many times before, but tonight the air was heavy with unspoken tension. Tope and David arrived promptly, with Tope smiling as if nothing was wrong. Malik greeted them warmly, completely ignorant of the storm brewing beneath the surface. Bola played her part well, welcoming them with a polite smile, her heart pounding in her chest. As she exchanged pleasantries with Tope, her stomach twisted. They all sat, the conversation starting off light and casual. David, unaware of anything amiss, chatted about work and upcoming projects. Malik joined in, laughing at his friend's stories, while Tope added comments here and there, occasionally glancing at Malik in a way that made Bola's skin crawl. Throughout the dinner, Bola kept her emotions in check, steering the conversation away from anything too serious, all while watching Malik and Tope carefully. She could see the subtle glances they exchanged, the way Tope's gaze lingered on Malik when she thought no one was looking. The tension between them was palpable, but neither Malik nor Tope seemed to realize that Bola was fully aware of what was going on. With a calm, measured tone, Bola broke the silence. "There is something I need to say," she began, her voice betraying none of the turmoil inside of her. Everyone looked at her, sensing the seriousness of her tone. Malik, who had been sipping his wine, paused and set his glass down, curiosity flickering in his eyes. Tope, sitting across from Bola, seemed slightly uneasy, as if she could sense that something was about to go wrong. Bola looked directly at Malik, her voice steady. "I know about the affair." The room fell into a stunned silence. Malik froze, his face draining of color as the weight of her words hit him. He stared at Bola, speechless, his mind racing to process what he had just heard. Tope, sitting beside him, looked as if she had been struck, her eyes widening in shock. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Bola remained calm, though her heart was pounding in her chest. She had rehearsed this moment in her mind over and over again, and now it was here. She felt a strange sense of peace. "I know everything," she continued, her voice never wavering. "I know for a while now, and I've decided that this is where it ends. You've been having an affair with Tope all along." She reached down beside her and pulled out a manila folder. Inside were divorce papers, neatly prepared and ready to be signed. She slid them across the table, placing them in front of Malik. "Sign these," she said quietly, her tone firm. "It is over between us. You can go with her and nurse your child together." Malik stared at the papers, his mind reeling. He couldn't believe what was happening. The affair, which he had thought he could control, had unraveled before his very own eyes. His gaze shifted from the papers to Bola's face, searching for a sign of weakness, but there was none. David, who had been silent up until this point, stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. His face was a mask of disbelief and anger. As he turned to Tope, realization dawning on him. "You have been having an affair?" he demanded, his voice filled with shock. Tope, who had been sitting in stunned silence, finally found her voice. "David, she began, but she didn't get a chance to finish. "How could you?" David shouted, his hand clenched into fists. His face flushed with anger as he took a step towards Malik, his rage boiling over. "How could you do this to me?" To Bola. Before anyone could stop him, David swung his fist and landed a punch squarely on Malik's face. Malik stumbled back, catching himself on the edge of the table, his hand flying to his cheek where the blow had landed. The room erupted in chaos as David stared with fury, glaring at both Malik and Tope with a mixture of betrayal and disgust. Tope, still reeling from the shock of being exposed, didn't flinch. Instead, her face hardened, her eyes narrowing as she looked at Bola. "This is your fault," she spat, her voice dripping with venom. "You took away my love. You took Malik from me. He was first mine." Bola stared at her, momentarily stunned by Tope's audacity. She had expected some shame or guilt, but not this. Tope's jealousy, her bitterness, was laid bare for all to see. The woman who had once been her closest friend now stood before her, a stranger consumed by envy and spite. With a calmness that belied the storm of emotions inside her, Bola looked at Tope directly in the eyes. "You can have him," she said quietly. "If he was really yours, he wouldn't have married me." Tope's face twisted with anger, but Bola didn't flinch. She had said what she needed to say, and now it was over. She had lost her husband, yes, but she wasn't going to lose herself. She had the strength to move on, to rebuild her life without Malik and Tope. Malik's world crumbled in the days that followed that fateful dinner. Bola was gone, leaving behind a signed divorce settlement and a deafening silence that echoed through the empty house they once shared. His once orderly world had unraveled, and with it went everything that mattered: his wife, his home, and his dignity. He tried to reach out to Bola several times, desperate for a chance to explain, to apologize, to undo the damage he had caused, but Bola remained firm, her resolve unshaken. She had walked away from the wreckage with her head held high, determined to rebuild her life without him. Every message Malik sent went unanswered, and every call he made was ignored. Bola had made her decision, and there was no going back. Meanwhile, Tope's life wasn't faring any better. Her marriage to David dissolved almost immediately after the dinner. The divorce messy and filled with bitter accusations. David, who had once been so devoted to her, couldn't even look at her with stabbed disgust. Tope blamed him for his absence, for taking his work as his priority over her. The house they had shared, filled with memories of happier times, now felt cold and empty. Tope was left to deal with the wreckage of her life, the affair with Malik having destroyed everything she had built. A few months after the divorce, Tope suffered a miscarriage. The baby she had once hoped would bind her and Malik together was gone, and with it, any hope of redemption. The loss left her hollow, the grief consuming her. She had sacrificed her marriage, her friendship with Bola, and now even the child she had carried. All she was left with was regret, a bitter reminder of the choices she had made. She withdrew from the world, avoiding the whispers of gossip that seemed to follow her wherever she went. Her once vibrant personality dimmed, replaced by a shadow of her former self. Malik too struggled in the aftermath of the affair, with no home, no wife, no future. He was left to confront the consequences of his actions. The guilt weighed heavily on him, making it difficult for him to function in his everyday life. He often found himself lying awake at night, replaying every decision that had led to his downfall. His attempts to move on were met with failure after failure. He tried to date again, but every relationship was tainted by the guilt of his betrayal. No woman could fill the void that Bola had left behind. He had thrown away the love of a good woman for a fleeting affair, and now there was no undoing the damage. Tope and Malik, once consumed by their affair, now found themselves facing the full weight of their choices. Bola, on the other hand, had emerged from the storm with a quiet strength that surprised even her. Though heartbroken and deeply scarred by the betrayal, she refused to let it define her. She threw herself into her career, finding solace in her work and the fulfillment it brought her. With each passing day, she grew stronger, her confidence slowly returning. In time, Bola began to heal. She surrounded herself with supportive friends and family who helped her through the dark days. She didn't rush into a new relationship, choosing instead to focus on herself and her own happiness. As the months passed, her life began to flourish. She found new opportunities in her career and rediscovered the joy in life's simple pleasures. Though she occasionally thought of Malik and the life they had once shared, those memories no longer had the power to hurt her. She had made the right choice by walking away, and that decision had allowed her to grow into a stronger, more resilient woman. In the end, Malik and Tope were left to deal with the consequences of their betrayal. Bola, though forever changed by the experience, emerged stronger, knowing that she had done the right thing. David, on the other hand, went his own ways. Bola learned that sometimes the greatest strength comes from letting go of what no longer serves you and finding the courage to start all over again. The story teaches that betrayal and deceit in relationship leads to destruction, not only for the people being betrayed, but for those committing the betrayal as well. It shows that dishonesty and selfishness have serious consequences, often leaving individuals with regret and emptiness. The importance of integrity, loyalty, and communication in marriage is highlighted, while also showing the strength that comes from choosing to walk away from toxic situations. In the end, healing and personal growth come from facing pain and moving forward with dignity. Thank you so much for watching this fantastic story on African Stories by Tiana. Please don't forget to like, comment, share, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell for more amazing stories. See you next time.